Why was everyone already staring at her before she even said a word? The Georgia sun beat down mercilessly on Fort Blackstone, turning the concrete into a shimmering furnace. A bus door hissed open, and Maya Rodriguez stepped out, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, squinting against the glare. She was 20 minutes late, the kind of mistake that in this place might as well be a death sentence. Fort Blackstone wasn't just any training base. It was the graveyard of ambition, where the military sent recruits to see who would break first. The strong were hardened here. The rest were forgotten. And today, Maya looked like she belonged in the second category. Her uniform still smelled of fresh issue fabric, her posture stiff, her boots too new. She paused at the edge of the courtyard, aware of every eye tracking her, a lone figure standing in the open, already marked as prey. "Well, well, well," a voice boomed from the barracks entrance. "Look what the cat dragged in." Sergeant Kane emerged from the shadows, every step deliberate. His face looked like weathered leather, scarred from 2 tours in Afghanistan, the kind of man whose stare could peel paint. Behind him stood 12 male recruits, their laughter hanging thick in the humid air. They'd been caught mid-downtime, but their amusement made it clear. A late female recruit was the entertainment of the day. Kane circled her slowly, boots grinding gravel like a predator tasting blood. "You're late. In my world, late means dead. Dead means your squad dies. Your squad dies because of you." His voice was low, surgical. "And when that happens, I make your life a living hell. Are we clear?" Maya straightened. Sweat ran into her eyes, but her voice didn't shake. "Yes, Sergeant." "I can't hear you." "Yes, Sergeant." He stopped close enough for her to smell the coffee on his breath. "You see these men behind me? They've been here 3 weeks. 3 weeks of blood, sweat, and tears. They've earned their place." His gaze swept over her like a blade. You're an experiment, a checkbox for some politician's diversity quota. But don't worry, I'll treat you exactly the same as everyone else." His smirk was cold. "Which means I'm going to break you." The recruits chuckled. One of them, a mountain of muscle with Jackson on his shirt, grinned wide. Next to him, a wiry kid with nervous eyes fiddled with his gear, Stevens. Their laughter rolled like thunder. "Drop and give me 50, Kane barked. "Welcome to Fort Blackstone." Maya hit the ground, palms slapping the blistering concrete. The push-ups came easy at first. She'd trained for this moment, or so everyone thought. But by 20, her arms trembled. Sweat pooled on the ground. The circle around her tightened. "Come on, sweetheart," Jackson called out. "Maybe we should get her some knee pads." The laughter burned hotter than the sun. Maya bit her tongue and kept pushing. By 40, her hands were raw. At 49, her arms felt like fire. Then Kane's boot appeared inches from her face. "On your feet, Rodriguez. Time for the real fun." The next hour was humiliation sculpted into art. Kane marched them to the obstacle course, a nightmare of ropes, mud, and steel. Jackson stormed through like a machine. Stevens fumbled but made it. Then came Maya. The rope climb loomed 30 feet of thick hemp. She gripped, pulled, slipped, fell. Mud swallowed her. The air rushed from her lungs. "Maybe try the kiddie course next time," someone shouted. Kane's whistle cut through the jeers. Again. 3 times she fell. 3 times she climbed again. Blood streaked her palms, but she didn't stop. The 4th time she made it to the top. No cheers, no relief. "Congratulations," Kane said flatly. "You managed to do what everyone else did in 1 try." The wall traverse tore her knees. The tire run sent her sprawling. By the end, she was more mud than soldier. And yet she stood. That night the mess hall hummed with gossip. Recruits laughed, replaying her failures like a highlight reel. Maya sat alone, cleaning her bleeding palms with antiseptic wipes. She didn't look up, didn't defend herself. But when the overhead light caught her left wrist, something strange shimmered beneath the skin, a mark. It could have been a scar or something older. It coiled faintly, like a serpent in sleep. She smiled just a little. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The alarm screamed at 500. Maya jolted awake, body aching, bruises painting her ribs purple and yellow. Across the barracks, Jackson's voice boomed. "Rise and shine, princess. Another day to embarrass yourself." Laughter followed, but this time there was a darker edge. Stephen strutted over, holding a betting slip. 3-1 odds you wash out before Friday. I've got $5 on Wednesday." Maya ignored him, lacing her boots. One felt off. She pulled it off, shaving cream oozed out like toothpaste. The room erupted. Kane's whistle blew from outside. Formation, 5 minutes. Maya swapped boots, heart pounding, and sprinted to the yard, cream squelching in her socks. She made it with seconds to spare. Kane's eyes caught her instantly. "Rodriguez, what's wrong with your boots?" "Nothing, Sergeant." He stepped close, voice dropping low. "You show up to my formation looking like a clown and tell me nothing's wrong. Drop 100." Her palms screamed with every rep, but she didn't stop. When she finally staggered to her feet, Kane pointed toward the armory. "Weapons inspection, now." By the time she arrived, the others had already claimed the best rifles. She got what was left, an old M4 that looked like it had survived a war. The live-fire exercise was chaos. They moved in formation through smoke and gunfire, targets popping up like ghosts. Maya was halfway through when her rifle jammed. "Click, not bang." "Malfunction," she called out, following protocol. Kane was already there, eyes like fire. "Of course, it's Rodriguez, the weak link." He raised his voice for everyone to hear. "This is what happens when we let politics into the military." He forced her to clear the jam in front of everyone. Her hands shook. She succeeded barely. "Low crawl," Kane said coldly, "through the wire. Let everyone see what failure looks like." The razor wire pit stretched 100 yards, mud, gravel, barbs like teeth. Maya dropped to her belly and crawled. The wire tore her uniform. Mud filled her mouth. A barb raked her shoulder open. Pain flared hot, white. Behind her, Kane narrated every movement like a cruel teacher. "Notice how she crawls like a wounded animal." She kept moving. By the time she reached the end, she was bleeding from a dozen cuts. "Congratulations," Kane said, voice dripping disdain. "You've just taught the class how not to handle a malfunction." That evening the harassment escalated. Her uniform was shredded, her toiletries mixed into sludge, her pillows stuffed with more shaving cream. But the real cruelty came in the showers. She waited until late, hopping for solitude. Instead, she found Jackson, Stevens, and Morrison waiting by the controls. "Well, look who decided to clean up," Jackson sneered, blocking her exit. Maya ignored him, stepping under the hot water. For a moment the steam felt like mercy. Then Jackson reached over and cranked the valve all the way. Scalding water exploded from the shower head. Maya gasped, stumbling back, but Morrison blocked the way. Her skin turned crimson where the water hit. Steam filled the room. "Oops," Stevens said mockingly. "Water heater's acting up again." The three laughed, their shadows moving in the haze, but something changed in Maya's eyes. The fear was gone. She studied them one by one. Jackson, left side weak from an old injury. Stevens, right pocket bulging with his inhaler. Morrison's scar under his chin, shallow, nervous hands. "You're right," she said softly. "Maintenance really should fix that." And then she reached past Jackson, turned off the water, and walked right between them, her calmness more terrifying than any scream. As she reached the doorway, she looked back once. "Thanks for the reminder about equipment maintenance," she said quietly. "I'll make sure it's addressed." That night she lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Around her, laughter faded into snoring. Her skin still burned, but her mind was quiet, focused. The serpent mark on her wrist pulsed faintly beneath the bandage. They thought they'd broken her. They'd only awakened something far more dangerous. The mouse was done playing. Tomorrow, she thought, flexing her bruised fingers, tomorrow, they'd learn what real training felt like. The alarm shattered the silence like a scream in the dark. Red lights pulsed across the barracks walls, painting every face in shades of blood. For a split second, Maya thought she was dreaming. Then Sergeant Kane's voice thundered over the intercom, sharp as broken glass. All recruits to the staging area. This is not a drill, full combat gear, weapons ready, move your asses. The barracks erupted in chaos. 12 recruits scrambled for their rifles, boots half-laced, hands shaking. Maya moved differently, calm, silent. Her motions were practiced, deliberate. While others fumbled with magazines and cursed the darkness, she pulled on her gear with mechanical precision, as if she'd done this 1,000 times before. Jackson's voice cracked from across the room. "What the hell going on?" Stephen stammered, probably one of Kane's sick games. "He loves messing with us." But even as he said it, thunder rolled across the base, not from the sky but from deep within the compound. Explosions. Simulated perhaps, or not. The wind outside carried the smell of ozone and burning oil. When Maya stepped out into the night, the world looked like a fever dream. The Georgia humidity clung to the air, thick as breath. The obstacle course had been transformed into a smoke-choked maze, fog rolling low across the ground like ghostly fingers. Lightning flashed behind the clouds, illuminating twisted silhouettes of walls, dummies, and razor wire. And there, standing at the center of it all, was Kane. He looked carved from stone, illuminated by emergency lights that flickered like dying embers. "Listen up, maggots," he roared. "Intelligence reports hostile infiltration of a civilian compound. Your mission: navigate, neutralize, extract. Rules of engagement are live fire. You miss your target, hit a civilian dummy, or get yourself killed, you fail. Now move." The recruits froze. Live fire, that was supposed to come months later. Kane's eyes found Maya. "Rodriguez," he barked, "since you're so eager to prove yourself, you go first. Try not to embarrass the rest of us." Laughter rippled through the formation, but it was forced now, nervous. Maya studied the fog. The layout wasn't random. She saw patterns the others didn't: kill zones, blind spots, choke points. Someone had rearranged the course into a labyrinth of precision. It wasn't training anymore. It was a test. Kane's whistle shrieked. "Go!" Maya stepped forward and vanished. One moment she stood at the starting line. The next, she melted into the fog like smoke returning to smoke. The recruits craned their necks, squinting to see. Jackson frowned. Where the hell did she go? The first target popped up 20 meters in, a steel silhouette. Crack! A single shot echoed through the mist, perfect headshot, then silence. Another target appeared, 2 quick bursts, another hit. Then 3 more in rapid succession. Each one found its mark. But no one could see her. "She's moving too fast," Stevens whispered. "No one moves like that." Kane said nothing. His eyes were locked on the shadows, every muscle tight. He designed this course himself. No recruit should have been able to clear half of it so quickly. The fog shifted. Somewhere inside, something darted past the cameras, a blur of motion that the system's sensors couldn't track. The screens flickered, then went black. "What's happening to the feed?" Kane demanded. "System glitch, Sergeant," the range tech shouted. "Sensors are malfunctioning." Kane's jaw clenched. Malfunction his ass. 8 minutes later, Maya emerged from the far end of the course, her uniform spotless, her rifle steady, her breathing calm. Every target down, no civilian hits, perfect score. The course was designed to take 15 minutes for experienced soldiers. She'd done it in half the time. The recruits stared in disbelief. Kane walked toward her slowly. "How?" he asked, voice low. "What kind of training?" Maya wiped a bead of sweat from her temple. "The kind that keeps you alive, Sergeant." Behind her, lightning flashed again. and for a moment her eyes caught the red glow, cold, sharp, focused. That night, whispers spread through Fort Blackstone like infection. "Did you see her?" She was gone in the smoke. She tagged the civilian dummies instead of killing them. Kane looked scared. I've never seen him scared. By dawn, the rumors had grown legs. Some said she was Special Forces. Others swore she was an experimental project. Stevens told Morrison, "You remember the showers. She didn't fight back, just stared, like she was memorizing us." Morrison's voice dropped to a whisper, "You think she's planning something?" But Maya said nothing. She moved through the morning like a ghost, precise, expressionless, calm. When she passed Jackson in the hallway, he flinched. Not because she glared, she didn't. She just looked at him, and that was somehow worse. The storm came 2 nights later. It began with thunder that rolled like distant artillery. Then lightning split the sky, white veins across black clouds. Rain fell hard enough to drown thought. Inside the barracks, the recruits slept uneasily, but Maya didn't sleep. She sat upright in her bunk, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling. Something about the storm felt wrong, too rhythmic, too deliberate. Her instincts hummed a warning. At 2:23 hours, the world exploded. A thunderclap, but deeper, sharper, closer. Then came the alarms. The metallic wail sliced through the barracks. Sergeant Kane's voice roared through the intercom. "This is not a drill. Hostile infiltration of the main compound. Armed intruders, perimeter breached. All recruits remain in barracks until further orders." For one heartbeat, silence. Then chaos. Stevens fumbled for his rifle, dropping the magazine. Morrison dove under his bunk. Jackson froze, staring at the window, at the flashes of muzzle fire cutting through the rain. "Oh my God," he whispered, "this is real." Maya was already moving. While the others panicked, she slipped from her bunk, movements fluid, quiet, deliberate. Through the window, she scanned the storm, counting flashes, listening to the rhythm of gunfire. 6 shooters, professional spacing, coordinated movement. Their weapons weren't standard issue. The way they advanced, too disciplined for random terrorists. They weren't amateurs, they were operators. 6 hostiles, she murmured to herself. Eastern European accents, military-grade tactics. Someone sold the base layout. Stevens blinked at her. "What did you say?" But she was gone. Vanished. One heartbeat, she was by the window. The next, the shadows had swallowed her whole. The security feeds from that night would later become classified, sealed under levels of clearance reserved for black operations. At 2:27 a.m., the cameras began to glitch. In one corridor, the motion sensors flickered on, then off, registering movement where no one stood. Camera 7 caught a blur flowing through a ventilation duct, too fluid to be human. Camera 12, in the armory, recorded rifles vanishing from racks, as though pulled by invisible hands. Camera 15 captured nothing but footsteps and whispers echoing in an empty hall. Something or someone was moving through Fort Blackstone like smoke through cracks. In the command center, the attackers had seized control. 6 hostiles, black uniforms, scarred faces. Their leader, a man with cold gray eyes, barked into his radio. "We have control of the compound. Get me access to the classified training files. You have 30 minutes to respond or the hostages die." He was efficient, controlled, a professional. But death was already moving through the walls around him. The first intruder died quietly. He was posted at the rear corridor, weapon up, scanning. A faint sound above, a breath maybe. He turned his head. Something dropped from the ceiling. A whisper, a blur, a pressure point strike to the carotid. Darkness. No sound, no struggle. Just silence. The second one never even saw her. He was recalibrating a comm unit when it went dead. As he leaned forward to check the cables, A shadow rose beneath the console, then swallowed him. A soft exhale, a body gently lowered. Static filled his radio. By 2:35 a.m., 3 cameras had gone offline, then 4, then 6. The leader's voice crackled over the channel. "Dmitri, report, Alexei status." Only Static answered. The third and fourth men went down seconds apart. The lights flickered, a deliberate power cut. The room plunged into darkness. Then came a sound like silk brushing across metal. One man reached for his night vision goggles, never made it. Something coiled around his throat, tight, precise. He dropped soundlessly. The fourth spun, weapon raised, and froze. In the flickering emergency light, 2 eyes glinted back at him. Cold, unblinking. The last thing he saw before the dark took him was the faint shimmer of a serpent-shaped scar on a woman's wrist. When the emergency lights finally stabilized, only 2 of the 6 remained, barricaded inside the command center with their hostages. Their leader's composure cracked. "This is impossible. Who is doing this?" The answer came from above. A metallic clang. A shadow dropped through the ventilation grate like a falling phantom. Maya landed in a crouch, silent, balanced, deadly. The 2 men opened fire. Muzzle flashes lit the room. She moved through the bullets like liquid, her body flowing low, then high, faster than the human eye could track. The first man's rifle clicked empty. Maya was already in front of him. A twist, a strike. The weapon clattered away. The second lunged. She countered, using his momentum, spinning him into the wall. A sharp pressure point jab to the jaw, out cold. Silence returned. 6 trained mercenaries, neutralized. 0 casualties among the hostages. Maya exhaled, slow, calm, then picked up a stray rifle, checking its safety. When the response team finally breached the command center, they found her sitting in a chair. Calm, composed. 6 unconscious men lined neatly against the wall, their weapons stacked like an offering. The team leader gaped. "What happened here?" Maya looked up with steady eyes. "I hid in a supply closet when the shooting started," she said quietly. "When I came out, they were already like this. I think they fought among themselves." The officer frowned, then looked at the carnage. It didn't make sense. None of it did. But Maya's hands were steady, her eyes unreadable, and her file just a low-performing recruit. There had to be another explanation. Had to be. But deep down, no one could shake the feeling that they'd seen something they weren't supposed to. That night back in the barracks, the recruits whispered. "You heard the gunfire stop." She wasn't there when it happened. They said the intruders were neutralized before backup arrived. Maya lay quietly in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. In the faint red glow of the emergency lights, the mark on her wrist seemed to shimmer again, coiling, alive. The storm outside raged on. But in her silence, something far more dangerous was waking. Fort Blackstone would never be the same again. And neither would they. By sunrise, the storm had passed, but Fort Blackstone looked like a scar on the earth. Smoke still rose from the shattered perimeter wall. Floodlights flickered across mud and twisted metal. The air smelled of gunpowder and wet asphalt. Paramedics moved like ghosts, checking the wounded. But no one could explain what had really happened inside the command center. The official line spread fast. Terrorist infiltration, neutralized before they could breach critical systems. A miracle, they called it, but miracles don't leave footprints. Colonel Marcus Harrison arrived at 600 hours sharp. A black sedan cut through the morning mist, its headlights slicing through the haze. He stepped out, metals glinting faintly beneath his trench coat, his jaw set like carved granite. 30 years in special operations had made him a man allergic to coincidence, and what had happened at Blackstone reeked of it. He walked through the compound without a word, boots crunching glass, every pair of eyes turning toward him. Soldiers stiffened when he passed. Everyone knew Harrison. He was the man sent when the impossible needed explaining. And right now, the impossible had a body count. Sergeant Kane waited by the main gate, posture rigid but eyes haunted. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by something that looked a lot like fear. "Sir," he began, "we weren't expecting." "Where's the footage?" Harrison cut him off. His tone was calm but heavy, like a weapon about to fire. "Sir, most of the security system malfunctioned during the incident. Lightning strikes, power surges. I've seen what survived." Harrison's voice could have frozen fire. "Conference room now." Minutes later, the two men sat in a darkened briefing room. A projector hummed softly. On the screen, grainy security footage replayed on loop, distorted, fragmentary, yet still enough to twist the stomach. Camera 7, something sliding through a vent, too fluid, too precise. Camera 12, rifles vanishing from racks, one by one. Camera 15, footsteps echoing in an empty hall. And then something dropping from a ceiling grate, moving with inhuman grace. "Freeze it there," Harrison ordered. Kane paused the tape, the image pixelated. A silhouette human maybe, but blurred by interference. "Enhance Sector 7. Kane obeyed, his hands shaking. The screen magnified, each pixel an unstable shimmer of gray. There, barely visible on the figure's wrist, a mark. Small, circular, coiled. Harrison's throat went dry. He leaned closer. "Jesus Christ." Kane swallowed. "Sir." Harrison didn't answer. His mind raced through years of buried briefings, sealed files, operations that didn't officially exist. He'd seen that mark before, once, long ago, on the wrist of a woman who'd saved an entire platoon and then disappeared without a trace. A serpent coiled to strike, black viper insignia. He turned sharply. "Get me personnel files for every recruit currently on base." "Sir, that's highly irregular." "In the last 12 hours, Harrison said quietly, 6 professional killers were neutralized by someone who moved like smoke and struck like lightning, and whoever did it vanished into the ranks like nothing happened. Do you want to quote regulations to me right now, Sergeant?" Kane paled. "No, sir." "Then move." 15 minutes later, a stack of personnel folders lay open on the conference table. 12 recruits. Normal stats, normal backgrounds, all unremarkable. Except one. Rodriguez Maya E. Age 24. Prior service, none. Education, State University, communications major. Psych profile, stable, cooperative, average aptitude. Too clean, too tidy, like someone had built her file, not filled it. Harrison stared at the photo, a young woman with dark hair and an expression you'd forget 5 seconds after seeing it. Forgettable, and that was the point. He felt a cold, not twist in his gut. No civilian covers are that clean unless someone wants them to be. "I want to see the recruits," he said finally. "All of them, formation in 10 minutes." The morning sun burned through the mist as the recruits assembled on the parade ground. 12 figures stood at attention, uniforms crisp, faces pale. The previous night's chaos clung to them like fog. Harrison walked the line slowly, the silence heavy enough to crush. He'd done this hundreds of times, reading people, measuring fear. The nervous twitch of a finger, the shallow breathing that betrays guilt. Jackson's jaw trembled. Stevens kept swallowing, his eyes darting everywhere except the colonel's. Morrison looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. But Maya Rodriguez stood perfectly still. Her breathing calm, posture effortless, eyes forward. If the others were shaken recruits, she was stone. Harrison stopped in front of Jackson. "Rough night, son." "Yes, sir. We followed orders, stayed in the barracks like we were told." "All of you?" Jackson's eyes flicked just for a heartbeat toward Maya, then back. "Yes, sir, all of us." Harrison nodded slowly, continuing down the line. Each story was the same, each one rehearsed. Finally, he stopped before Maya. Up close, she was even more ordinary than her photo. Average height, average build, nothing about her screamed danger, nothing except the way she didn't react. Most people under inspection fidgeted, blinked too often, overcompensated. She did none of that. He'd seen that kind of stillness before, on men who'd spent years operating behind enemy lines, whose nerves had been replaced with instinct. "Rodriguez," he said softly. "Yes, sir." "You were in the barracks all night." "Yes, sir." "Didn't see anything unusual." "No, sir, just heard the alarms and gunfire. We stayed put like Sergeant Kane ordered." Harrison held her gaze. Those eyes, calm, unreadable, gave nothing away. He could almost hear the lies breathing between her words. He nodded once, then did something no one expected. He reached out and gently took her left wrist. The recruit stiffened. He pushed back the cuff of her sleeve. And there it was. A small dark scar, coiled and precise, not ink, burned into the flesh with surgical permanence. The serpent. The mark. Harrison's breath caught. When he spoke, it was a whisper that somehow carried across the parade ground. "That's a black viper mark." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Every recruit froze, eyes widened. Jackson's skin went white. Stevens actually stumbled backward. Everyone at Fort Blackstone had heard the stories, the legends whispered in barracks and bars. Black Vipers, the shadow unit that didn't exist on paper. Operators trained to disappear, to kill, to complete missions no one would admit were real. And now, one of them was standing right in front of them. Maya didn't move, didn't flinch. She looked up at the colonel with quiet, measured calm. "Sir," she said softly. Harrison released her wrist like it burned. His mind reeled. What the hell is a Viper operative doing here, undercover, as a failing recruit? "How long?" he asked, voice barely audible. Her eyes met his. The mask slipped, just for a second, and what looked back at him wasn't a 24-year-old woman. It was something cold, ancient, merciless. 17 confirmed, she said quietly. 3 extractions, 2 deep-cover infiltrations lasting over a year each. The silence that followed was total. Even the wind seemed to pause. Harrison felt the ground shift beneath him. 17 confirmed. She killed more men than most battalions. And here she'd been doing push-ups, crawling through mud, letting rookies laugh in her face. He exhaled slowly. "Agent Serpent," he murmured. Her chin dipped almost imperceptibly. Recognition, confirmation. A legend standing before him, wrapped in the skin of an ordinary woman. The other recruits looked stricken, like children realizing the monster under the bed was real, and they'd been mocking it for weeks. Jackson's throat worked trying to find words. You're really." Maya turned her head, meeting his gaze. Her smile was small and sharp. "Hello, Jackson. Did you sleep well last night?" The big man stumbled back, remembering the destroyed gear, the serpent symbol drawn beside his bunk, the feeling of being watched in the dark. Sergeant Kane tried to speak, but Harrison raised a hand. His voice cut through the silence. "Sergeant, dismiss the others." Kane blinked. "Sir." "Now." The recruits hesitated only a second before scattering, eyes down, hearts hammering. None dared meet Maya's gaze as they passed. When they were gone, only Harrison and Maya remained. He studied her, not the surface, the still face, the steady hands, but the energy underneath. Controlled danger, the kind that didn't announce itself until it was already too late. "How long have you been embedded?" he asked. 6 weeks total, 3 active observation. Mission parameters. Evaluate training effectiveness. Identify security vulnerabilities. Assess recruit psychology under stress. Harrison nodded slowly. It made sense, sort of. A covert audit disguised as an experiment. Send in a legend to see who broke, who bullied, who led. And last night, he asked. Hostiles breached perimeter using insider knowledge, she said evenly. Threat assessment indicated imminent danger to personnel. I acted within mission parameters to neutralize the threat. You broke cover, Harrison said quietly. I preserved the mission, she replied. The safety of the recruits was paramount. Her tone wasn't defensive, just factual, like she was reporting the weather. Harrison leaned back, studying her. Your cover blown now. The whole base will know by sunset. Maya's lips curved, half smile, half warning. Colonel, my cover was blown the moment you said my call sign out loud. He blinked. But that's not necessarily a problem, she added. Meaning the real training is about to begin. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing amid the silence of the parade ground, wondering which of them truly commanded this base anymore. By midday, the secret wasn't secret. It spread like wildfire, from the armory to the kitchens, from the officers' quarters to the motor pool. Maya Rodriguez, the clumsy recruit who couldn't climb a rope, was Agent Serpent, the Black Viper operative. The mess hall was silent that afternoon. Soldiers who'd seen combat stared at her like she was an apparition. Kitchen staff avoided eye contact, moving around her like she might explode if spoken to. But the recruits' reactions cut deepest. Jackson entered slowly, his bulk suddenly uncertain. Stevens followed, tray trembling in his hands. Morrison looked like he'd seen a ghost. They took seats far from her, whispering. Stevens' voice shook. She's been watching us this whole time. Every joke, every prank, Jackson muttered. She was letting us dig our own graves. The gear that got destroyed, Morrison added quietly. Those drawings by our bunks, she was warning us. They fell silent, realizing what it meant. For weeks they'd mocked her, taunted her, tested her patience. And all that time, she'd been a weapon choosing not to strike. Maya ate quietly at her corner table. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. But when she stood to leave, the room seemed to exhale. Plates clattered. Conversation stopped. Every gaze followed her to the door. Outside, the wind stirred the flags over Fort Blackstone. Somewhere behind her, Jackson whispered to no one in particular. We thought she was the mouse. He swallowed hard. But she was the viper all along. By 1500 hours, every soldier on base had heard the same impossible sentence whispered like gospel. Maya Rodriguez is Agent Serpent. The name carried weight, not just rumor, not just myth. Serpent was one of those words that made battle-hardened men lower their voices. Black Viper operatives weren't supposed to exist. They were ghost stories told in foxholes and safe houses, whispers about missions that never made the news and enemies who simply disappeared. And now one of those ghosts had been hiding among them, eating in their mess hall, sleeping in their barracks, doing push-ups beside them in the Georgia heat. By late afternoon, Fort Blackstone wasn't a training ground anymore. It was a living secret, and everyone in it knew they were standing inside a story that would never be written. Colonel Harrison called an emergency assembly. Every recruit, every instructor, every officer, the entire base crowded into the main auditorium, an echoing, steel-walled cathedral built for debriefings, not confessions. The low hum of whispers filled the air until Harrison stepped onto the stage. He didn't need a microphone. The silence arrived on its own. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice steady. Last night, this base was attacked by 6 armed hostiles. He paused, letting the tension breathe. These were not amateurs. They were trained professionals with insider knowledge and military-grade weaponry. They breached our perimeter, seized the command center, and took hostages. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, fear mixed with awe. Most had heard fragments of the story, but not from the colonel himself. What you don't know, Harrison continued, is that those 6 men were neutralized before backup arrived. Every single one of them incapacitated with 0 casualties. No gunfire from our side. No alarms triggered. Just silence. He let the words hang. 6 professional killers, stopped by 1 person. Now you could have heard a pin drop. Harrison's eyes swept the crowd, hundreds of faces, each waiting, each uncertain. That operator, he said finally, has been living among us for the past 6 weeks, training with our recruits, eating in our mess hall, sleeping in our barracks. He took a slow breath, the kind you take before detonating a truth. Agent Serpent, he said, please stand. In the center of the recruit section, Maya rose quietly to her feet. No music, no applause, just silence and 1,000 eyes locking on her at once. She looked the same as always, hair tied back, uniform crisp but plain, expression unreadable. There was nothing glamorous about her, and that made the sight even more unsettling. This was no Hollywood soldier, this was real. This operative, Harrison continued, is part of a classified division known only to a handful of people in this country, the Black Vipers. Her mission here was to evaluate Fort Blackstone's training program, identify weaknesses, and observe our recruits under pressure. He paused, eyes flicking toward the group of men who had tormented her for weeks, Jackson, Stevens, Morrison. When a real threat came to our doorstep, Harrison said, she acted, alone. She protected every life on this base, including those who didn't think she belonged here. It started softly, a slow clap from one of the senior officers in the front row, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. The sound was thunder. Applause crashed against the walls, echoing like artillery fire. But Maya didn't bask in it. She didn't even smile. Her hands rested calmly at her sides, her eyes scanning the room, analyzing, always aware, always prepared. To her, praise was noise, survival was silence. When the applause faded, Harrison spoke again. Effective immediately, Agent Serpent will be taking over advanced tactical instruction for all recruits. Her methods will be unconventional. Her standards will be absolute. I suggest you listen. He turned toward Maya. The floor is yours, Agent. Maya stepped forward, her boots echoing softly on the steel stage. She let the silence breathe before she spoke. When I arrived here, she said, her voice calm, clear, deliberate, most of you saw weakness. A few faces dropped, ashamed. You saw someone who struggled with the obstacle course, who fell in the mud, who made mistakes. You saw something to laugh at, something less than you. She paused, eyes sweeping the crowd, not angry, not vengeful, just steady. And that's the problem. You've been taught that strength has a look, that leadership has a voice, that courage comes with a certain face or body type or history. You think you can spot warriors by sight. You can't. Her gaze landed briefly on Jackson, then on Stevens, and finally on Morrison. True strength hides, she said softly. It observes, it endures, it learns while everyone else is laughing. Because when the time comes, that's the one who moves first, and fastest, and right. The words hung in the air, heavier than any command. You want to survive out there, she continued, her voice lowering, the cadence tightening, the voice of someone who had survived too much. Then stop underestimating quiet people. Stop mocking the ones who learn slower, speak softer, feel deeper. Stop assuming that empathy is weakness. Because I promise you, the day you face a real enemy, you'll pray to have someone like that beside you. No one moved, no one blinked. Then she said something that Harrison would remember for the rest of his life. Your uniform doesn't make you a soldier, she whispered. Your heart does, and the heart learns in silence. The words felt like a blade slipping under armor, not cruel, just precise. Then she stepped down from the stage, leaving the crowd in stunned stillness. That night the mess hall felt different. Gone were the whispers and laughter. Gone were the sideways glances and quiet jokes. People still spoke about her, but now their voices carried something new, reverence. When Maya entered, conversations died mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. She sat at her usual corner table, methodically eating in silence, and yet the air around her felt charged, like the calm before a storm. Across the room, Jackson entered with Stevens and Morrison trailing behind him. Their swagger was gone, replaced by a careful humility. Jackson hesitated, tray trembling in his hands. Finally, he approached her table. I mean agent, he started. She didn't look up, sit. He obeyed. Stevens followed, eyes wide and anxious. Morrison hovered for a second, then dropped into the seat opposite her. Jackson cleared his throat. I wanted to apologize for everything. Maya's fork paused. Everything. The things we said, the things we did, the bets. He stopped, shame flooding his face. We didn't know who you were. She looked at him then, really looked. Her expression softened, but only slightly. You didn't need to know who I was, she said. You just needed to know who you were. The words landed heavy. Jackson lowered his eyes. We were wrong. Maya nodded once. That's not enough. Being wrong is easy. Learning is harder. So tell me, Jackson, what did you learn? He swallowed. That you should never judge someone by appearances. That strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just endures. Her gaze didn't waver. What else? Jackson thought, choosing his words carefully. That how you treat people when you think they're powerless, that's who you really are. Maya held his stare for a long moment, then finally nodded. Good, hold on to that. She stood, gathering her tray. Because starting tomorrow, I'm going to teach you what strength actually looks like. The next morning, the recruits met a different kind of instructor. Sergeant Kane was still there, but even he seemed to defer to her now, watching from a distance like a man who'd glimpsed something sacred and didn't dare interfere. Maya stood before the group, the sun cutting sharp lines across her face. This training, she began, isn't about muscles or speed. It's about survival, awareness, adaptability. You can't fight what you can't see, and you can't survive what you don't understand. Her sessions were brutal, not in physical punishment but in precision. She made them run the obstacle course blindfolded, forcing them to rely on sound and instinct. She taught them to track each other silently through the woods, using scent, wind, and rhythm. She dismantled everything they thought they knew about combat and replaced it with something deeper. By the third day, they weren't just sweating, they were thinking. Jackson learned to move quietly, to anticipate, not react. His arrogance melted, replaced by purpose. Stevens, once jittery and unsure, discovered his strength lay in calculation, in seeing patterns others missed. Even Morrison, whose cruelty had once defined him, began to move with restraint, awareness, discipline. Maya watched them change, with the quiet satisfaction of a sculptor seeing form emerge from stone. At night she would walk the base alone, the cicadas buzzing in the trees, the humid air heavy on her skin. And sometimes, when no one was around, she would touch the small scar on her wrist, the serpent, and feel it pulse faintly. The black viper mark wasn't just a symbol, it was a promise to be the thing no one saw coming. And yet, somewhere in the stillness of those nights, she felt something she hadn't in years. Hope. Not for herself, but for the people she was training, for the ones who'd learned humility the hard way. Maybe, she thought, strength didn't have to hide forever. Maybe it could teach. By the end of the week, even Colonel Harrison had noticed the shift. The base ran smoother, fewer arguments, fewer failures. The recruits carried themselves differently, alert, focused, measured. He found Maya at dusk, standing near the range, watching her squad practice silent formations in the fading light. They're changing, he said quietly. Maya didn't look at him. They're remembering what it means to protect, not dominate. Harrison nodded, watching the recruits move like shadows. You know you could have left after the attack, after I said your name. Her lips curved faintly. Maybe I wanted to see if this place could learn what it tried to teach me. He studied her for a long moment, and has it? She finally turned, meeting his gaze. Ask me when they stop seeing rank before humanity. The wind stirred between them, carrying the faint sound of the recruits calling cadence. Harrison exhaled slowly, half in admiration, half in unease. You're not just training soldiers, Agent Serpent. You're rewriting them. Not rewriting, Maya said softly, reminding. As she turned back toward the field, the light caught the faint mark on her wrist. And for a heartbeat, it seemed alive again, coiling, watching, waiting. The serpent hadn't vanished. It had evolved. And for the first time, it was teaching others how not to fear the bite. The Georgia air was thick that morning, a curtain of heat that clung to the lungs and slowed the blood. Even the wind felt heavy, as if it carried secrets it didn't want to release. Maya stood at the edge of the training field, arms folded, eyes tracing the recruits who now moved through drills with precision. It had been 3 weeks since the night the fort changed forever. 3 weeks since 6 ghosts fell, and 12 recruits were forced to see what strength really meant. Now they moved differently, quieter, sharper. Gone was the laughter that once echoed through the barracks. Gone was the easy cruelty. In its place, discipline, purpose, fearless stillness. And yet Maya knew better than to believe in perfection. Change, real change, was fragile. It looked solid until something cracked it open. She sensed the crack coming long before anyone else did. At 700 hours, the alert sirens blared again. But this time there was no thunder, no lightning, no storm. Just the sudden wail of klaxons slicing through morning calm. Recruits froze mid-drill. Kane ran from the command post, shouting, "Emergency exercise, Code Gray. This is a full base simulation. Let's move, move, move." The recruits broke into motion, sprinting toward their stations. Maya stayed where she was, watching, her expression unreadable. From the balcony above, Colonel Harrison observed 2, arms crossed. The test had been his idea, a surprise full-scale simulation to measure the unit's readiness. But Maya had only agreed under one condition. He couldn't warn her recruits. They had to think it was real. Now, as smoke grenades erupted across the airfield and alarms echoed from the motor pool, panic rippled through the ranks. Jackson shouted for Stevens to take the north perimeter. Morrison was already at the tower, scanning the tree line with binoculars. Maya followed silently, assessing. Her eyes flicked from movement to movement, body language, posture, breath control. Training reveals itself in stress, and fear always shows first in the hands. Jackson's were steady. Stevens' were too tight. Morrison's were trembling just slightly. She filed it all away. "Contact east side," a voice yelled over comms. Half the recruits turned instinctively toward the sound. Rookie mistake. Maya's voice sliced through the chaos. "Don't chase sound, confirm with sight. Move in shadows, not noise." The words snapped them back into focus. The field transformed. Instead of running like panicked rookies, they dropped into formation, eyes scanning, hands steady, movements controlled. Harrison watched from the balcony, a faint smile tugging his lips. "You trained them well," he murmured. But Maya didn't smile. Something in her gut was wrong. The smoke was too thick. The timing of the sirens off by seconds. The patterns of enemy movement too coordinated. And then through the haze she saw it. A flash of muzzle fire not simulated. Real. She froze. Another burst. This time she heard the difference, the sound of metal striking concrete, not blanks. Her voice cut through the radio, low and sharp. "Harrison, shut it down. This isn't a drill." The colonel's brow furrowed. "What?" "I said shut it down. Those aren't blanks." And then came the scream. From the north fence. Stephen's voice. Maya ran. The scene at the perimeter was chaos. Smoke curled through the wire. One of the recruits lay sprawled in the dirt, clutching his arm, blood slicking his sleeve. Real blood. 3 figures in tactical black moved through the smoke, silent, fast, deliberate. Not simulation actors, not base personnel. Harrison's voice crackled in her earpiece. Confirmed breach, unknown hostiles, how the hell? Maya cut him off. Pull your men back, secure the barracks, I'll handle this. She crouched beside the wounded recruit. You're not dying today, kid. Press here, hard. The boy's eyes widened, recognition and fear colliding. Agent, what's happening? Reality, she said quietly and stood. The next minutes unfolded, like something between nightmare and memory. Maya slipped into the smoke, her movements liquid, precise. Her breathing slowed to nothing, her senses flaring outward, each footstep, each exhale, each metallic click around her mapped like coordinates. 3 hostiles. 2 rifles, 1 suppressed pistol. Patterns, angles. They weren't random attackers, they were testing her. She dropped low, sliding behind a stack of sandbags. Her hand brushed the dirt, damp, cool, and the scent of oil told her everything. Imported ammunition, Eastern Bloc origin. The same signature as the mercenaries from the first attack. So this wasn't over. It had never been. A silhouette moved through the smoke ahead. She waited until his left boot crossed the second line of mud, the moment he'd least expect it, then struck. Her knife flashed once, a clean surgical strike, no sound, no hesitation. The man dropped silently. The second spun toward the noise, too slow. She was already behind him. A twist, a sweep, a chokehold that ended in 6 seconds flat. 2 down. The third remained, clever enough to retreat, using the fog to disappear. But Maya could feel him, the way predators feel each other. She followed, cutting through the smoke until she reached the far fence line. The wind shifted, and she saw him crouched, adjusting his rifle, comms mic at his jaw. Her mind raced. He wasn't aiming at her. He was aiming past her, toward the recruits regrouping by the vehicles. Jackson, Morrison, Stevens. Her recruits. Her pulse steadied, 1 breath in, 1 breath out. Then she moved. A sprint, silent, low, unstoppable. The man saw her too late. He fired once, twice, both rounds slicing the air just inches from her shoulder. Maya slammed into him, driving him into the mud. The rifle went skidding. They struggled, 2 bodies, 1 will to live. He reached for a knife. She pinned his wrist, eyes locking on his face. "Who sent you?" she demanded. He spat blood, smiling through broken teeth. "You already know." Her heart froze. The accent, the smirk, the same signature she'd seen before. Black Viper cleanup teams. The people sent to erase evidence of missions gone rogue. And now they were here for her. By the time the gunfire stopped, the smoke had thinned. 3 intruders down, 2 recruits injured, no one dead. Maya stood amid the wreckage, breathing steady, rifle lowered. Harrison arrived moments later, flanked by MPs. He took 1 look at the scene, at the bodies, the recruits, the blood, and his expression darkened. "Talk to me," he said. "They weren't random," Maya replied. "They were trained, coordinated, they came for me." Harrison's jaw tightened. "You're saying?" "I'm saying someone inside authorized this." The weight of the words sank like lead. The colonel rubbed his temple. "Why now?" "Because I broke cover. The Vipers protect their secrets, Colonel, and right now I'm their biggest one." She knelt beside one of the bodies, pulling a patch from his sleeve, a black insignia with no unit number, no flag, just the faint outline of a serpent eating its tail. "Internal code," she murmured, "Ouroboros. The symbol of self-destruction. A kill order." Harrison stared. "They're trying to clean up their own." "Not just clean up," she said softly. Send a message. By evening, the base had gone into lockdown. Barricades, patrols, radio silence. Maya stood in the colonel's office, the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She looked tired now, not physically, but in her soul. "You should have left," Harrison said. "They won't stop until they've buried every trace of you." Her gaze lifted. "Then I'll make sure they have to dig deep." He almost smiled, still defiant. "Still alive," she corrected. He exhaled, sitting behind his desk. "You know, when I first saw that mark on your wrist, I thought it meant danger. Now I think it means survival." Maya didn't answer. Her eyes drifted toward the window, where recruits were patrolling in formation, her recruits. "They're ready," she said finally, "but not for war, for truth." Harrison frowned, meaning. "Meaning if they can't see what's coming, none of this training matters. The next attack won't come from outside the wire, Colonel. It'll come from inside it." The words chilled the air. That night the recruits gathered in silence outside the barracks. The power was out across half the compound. The moon hung low, painting the world in blue. Maya approached, rifle slung over her shoulder, her face unreadable. "They came for me," she said simply, "but they could have gone through you to get it done." No one spoke. Jackson finally stepped forward. "Then we make sure they don't." Stevens nodded. "You trained us for this." Maya studied them, these once broken, arrogant recruits now standing like soldiers. Her voice softened. "You don't owe me that." Morrison's voice cut through the dark. "Maybe not, but we owe ourselves. You showed us who we were when we were at our worst. Now let us prove who we are at our best." Something inside her cracked, something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Pride. She nodded once. "Then listen carefully. From now on you move as one. You breathe as one. No names, no ranks, just purpose." She looked toward the distant perimeter, where the wind hissed through the wire. "They'll come again," she whispered, "and when they do they won't find recruits." Jackson tilted his head. "What will they find?" Her eyes gleamed faintly in the moonlight. "Vipers." Hours later, long after the others had turned in, Harrison found her outside, sitting alone on the firing range, the night pressing close around her. He didn't announce himself, just sat down beside her, the crickets filling the silence. "You know," he said quietly, "I read your file, the real one." Maya didn't turn. "That must have taken strings." "I still have a few," he said. "Black Viper Operative 9 Echo, last mission classified as failed recovery. You were presumed dead." She nodded faintly. "I was." Harrison studied her profile, the calm, the stillness, the hint of sorrow. "What happened?" "Wrong orders," she said. "Right instincts, they didn't like that combination." He frowned. "So they erased you." "They tried." Silence stretched between them. Finally he said, "You're not alone anymore, you know." Maya turned slightly, eyes softening. "Neither are they." She stood, brushing dirt from her palms. "Good night, Colonel." "Good night, Agent." She hesitated, then said something that sounded almost like a prayer. "Sometimes, the only way to stop a serpent from devouring itself is to teach it not to fear its own bite." And with that, she walked into the dark, the faint glint of her mark catching the moonlight, a shadow disappearing into silence once more. The next dawn came without color. Gray sky, gray wind, a silence that didn't belong to morning. Fort Blackstone looked alive but felt hollow, like a body still breathing after the soul had gone. Soldiers moved through the motions, eyes tired, boots dragging, every one of them aware that something unseen was circling them now. In the command center, the monitors flickered. Communications were still jammed across half the base. Harrison stood over the map table, jaw tight, while Maya watched the static roll across the screens. "Still nothing from Central Command?" she asked. He shook his head. "No response since 300 hours. We've sent 6 coded requests for backup. Either they're ignoring us or someone's intercepting. She exhaled softly. They're intercepting, that's what I do. Harrison's eyes lifted, meaning someone on the inside. She didn't answer, she didn't have to. Outside, the recruits were patrolling the inner perimeter, tighter formations, smaller movements, sharper reflexes. Maya's training had turned them into a living web. Each one of them could sense the others without looking. But that wouldn't stop what was coming. She could feel it, that subtle shift in the air, like the calm before detonation. At 8:17 hours, the first sign appeared. A file, left anonymously on Harrison's desk. No label, no sender. Just a small black flash drive wrapped in a torn piece of uniform fabric, the same shade of gray as the Viper field fatigues. Harrison plugged it in despite Maya's warning glance. The screen filled with data, encrypted logs, mission reports, names. Her name. The files dated back years, operations she hadn't thought anyone still had records of, and beneath them, a final entry marked Project Persephone. Harrison scrolled, his expression darkened with every line. This can't be right. What does it say? He looked at her, voice low. It says you were never meant to survive your last mission. She froze. Orders from inside the Viper division, he continued. Termination directive. They wanted to decommission the entire unit, called it an ethical containment protocol. Maya's stomach turned. She knew the language. Containment protocol was the agency's euphemism for cleanse the field. It was never about ethics. It was about erasing mistakes. Harrison's jaw tightened. So that attack wasn't retaliation, it was housekeeping. She nodded once slowly. And I was the dirt they forgot to sweep. Outside, the base loudspeakers crackled feedback cutting through static. Then, a distorted voice. Attention, Fort Blackstone personnel. This is command control. Effective immediately, Agent Serpent is to be detained for questioning regarding unauthorized lethal engagement. Every head turned. She is considered armed and dangerous. Comply immediately. All units stand down. The voice faded, replaced by the hiss of silence. Jackson's voice came through the radio, breathless. Agent, what the hell going on? Don't move, Maya ordered. Stay with your squad and wait for my signal. Are we under attack? Yes, she said, but not the kind you think. Within minutes, military police swarmed the compound. Trucks rolled in. Drones circled overhead. They were fast, coordinated, deliberate, too deliberate. Harrison's stomach dropped. They're not here to question you. They're here to eliminate the witness. Maya was already strapping her holster. Then we don't give them a clean shot. He grabbed her arm. If you run, they'll call it confirmation. You'll become everything they accuse you of being. She turned to him, calm, steady. Colonel, they already decided what I am. The only choice left is what I do about it. For the first time since he'd known her, Harrison saw fear flicker behind her eyes, not for herself, but for the recruits. They'll come for them too, she said softly. Anyone connected to me is a liability. He nodded, then we protect them. At 900 hours, the first shots were fired. Not blanks, not simulations, real bullets. The MPs breached the west gate, moving in formation, weapons raised. The recruits fell back instinctively, taking cover. Harrison barked orders through the comms. Hold positions. No one fires unless fired upon. Maya moved like lightning, weaving through the chaos, positioning her team with surgical precision. Jackson, cover east approach. Stevens, check the rooftops for drones. Morrison, get the wounded inside. The MPs advanced, not recklessly, but with practiced intent. These weren't ordinary soldiers following orders. These were executioners. As one of them rounded the corner, rifle raised, Maya stepped from the shadow and disarmed him in 3 motions, a twist, a strike, a sweep. She didn't kill him. She didn't have to. She just took his calm link and listened. Through the earpiece came a familiar voice, one she hadn't heard in years. "Hello, Serpent." Her blood went cold. "You were always too stubborn to stay buried." "Director Vale," she whispered. "You left a trail, Maya. Reports, witnesses, survivors. You disobeyed orders. You questioned missions that weren't yours to question. And now look what you've done, turned a military base into a rebellion." "You built this rebellion," she shot back. "You built me." "We built weapons, not saints." Static hissed between words. "Surrender quietly and I'll spare your recruits. They'll be transferred, reassigned, forgotten." She clenched her jaw. "And if I do? Then I'll remind you what extinction feels like." The line went dead. By midday, smoke covered half the base. Barracks on fire, vehicles overturned, communications jammed again. The recruits had fortified the inner sector, but the MPs kept advancing, disciplined, methodical, merciless. Jackson found her crouched behind a barricade, reloading. "What's the plan?" he demanded. She glanced up. "Survive." "That's not a plan. It's the only one that's ever worked." A nearby explosion rocked the ground, sending dust into the air. Jackson flinched, coughing. Maya grabbed his shoulder. "Listen to me. They want confusion. They want you to panic. Don't give them that. You've been training for this. Trust what you learned: silence, patience, movement." He nodded, eyes fierce. "Yes, ma'am." As he turned to go, she called out, "Jackson." He looked back. She hesitated just long enough for something human to surface in her voice. "Don't let anger lead you. It's what they count on." He gave a grim smile. "You really think you can still tell me what to do?" Her answer was soft. "I don't think I know." Then she vanished into the smoke. Meanwhile, in the command bunker, Harrison fought to maintain control. Reports flooded in, conflicting orders, scrambled comms, encrypted transmissions from command authority demanding immediate compliance. He knew half of it was forged, but proving that wouldn't matter if everyone already believed it. He opened a private line to Maya. "They've cut me out. They're using my own credentials against us. You can't hold them forever." "I'm not trying to hold them," she replied. "I'm trying to expose them." He frowned. "How?" "Every Viper operation is stored in a mirrored database, hidden under the Joint Task Council's archives. You still have clearance for that level." "That system's air-gapped," he said. "You need physical access." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm going there." He stared at the radio in disbelief. "You won't make it 200 meters. "Then I'll make it 100 twice." And she cut the line. By 14:30 hours, she'd slipped through the outer fence. The base around her burned fire, licking the horizon, the air full of sirens and shouts. She moved through it like a phantom, ducking between ruined vehicles, weaving through smoke, her mind locked on the comm tower near the southern compound, the only link between Fort Blackstone and the outside world. Behind her, distant gunfire echoed, the recruits holding the line. Her heart tightened. They weren't soldiers, not really. They were kids who'd learned too fast what war tasted like, and they were bleeding for her. When she reached the tower, she climbed, fast. The metal was slick with rain and ash, the air electric with heat. At the top, she pried open the relay box and inserted the drive she'd taken from Harrison's office, the one with Project Persephone. The console hummed to life, data scrolled. Encrypted files, field reports, video feeds, everything the world wasn't supposed to see. She hit transmit all. The screen blinked. Data uplink established. And then a voice behind her. "Always so predictable, Serpent." She turned slowly. Director Vale stood on the platform, a pistol steady in her hand. Gray hair, cold eyes, the same voice that had once guided Maya through missions, through kills, through lies. "You should have stayed dead," Vale said. Maya didn't move. "You trained me to survive. I trained you to obey." Maya's lips curved faintly. Guess that part didn't stick. Vale stepped closer, rain dripping down her coat. You think anyone will believe your story? They'll call you rogue, broken, another weapon gone bad. You'll be erased again. Maybe, Maya said softly, but this time I'll take your secrets with me. Vale's eyes hardened, then die knowing nothing changes. She pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the storm. Maya staggered, shoulder hit. Pain flared, bright and sharp. She dropped to one knee, but her hand still clung to the console. With her free hand, she reached into her vest and pulled a small detonator. Vale froze. You wouldn't, she said. Maya met her gaze, calm, resolute. You forget what you made me. She pressed the trigger. The tower erupted in light. A fireball tore through the sky, scattering metal and flame across the compound. From the barracks below, the recruits saw the explosion bloom and froze in stunned silence. Jackson whispered, "She did it." Stephen's voice cracked, "But what about?" Before he could finish, a second signal burst through the static on every screen, every radio, every channel. Maya's voice. Calm, steady, alive. To whoever's listening, truth doesn't need permission. It just needs light. The message repeated once, then faded into static. At dawn, the smoke still lingered. The tower was gone, the enemy was gone, and so was she. They found no body, just fragments of metal, shards of glass, and a single piece of fabric caught in the fence. A small strip, scorched but intact, marked with the faint outline of a coiled serpent. Harrison stood there for a long time, wind tugging at his coat. Behind him, the recruits gathered silently. Jackson asked, "Do you think she made it?" Harrison didn't answer right away. He looked at the rising sun, at the faint golden light cutting through the gray. Then he said quietly, "Vipers don't die, they shed." The recruits stood in silence, watching the dawn. And far beyond the base, somewhere deep in the city, a radio crackled to life in an abandoned safe house. Maya's hand reached out of the shadows, turning the dial. Her shoulder was bandaged, her eyes were calm. She whispered almost to herself, "Sometimes survival isn't living, it's teaching the world why you did." Then she pulled her hood up, stepped into the light, and disappeared into the noise of morning traffic, another ghost wearing the face of no one. The news broke before sunrise. First came the leak, hundreds of encrypted files flooding secure networks, classified reports hitting open feeds faster than they could be erased. Then the footage, black and white mission logs, interrogation clips, tactical overlays stamped Black Viper Project Persephone, EYES only. By 8 a.m., the world was watching. Anchor spoke her name in disbelief. Maya Rodriguez, Agent Serpent, the soldier who had died, been reborn, and burned her own shadow to expose the light. In Washington, the faces behind closed doors turned gray. Investigations launched. Denials issued. But the footage kept coming, unstoppable, each frame a confession from the machine that had built her. And far from that noise, at the edge of Georgia pine country, Fort Blackstone held its breath. The recruits woke to silence. No sirens, no shouting, just the hum of distant generators and the smell of smoke that still lingered from the night before. Jackson sat on the barracks steps, boots muddy, staring at the horizon. A small radio balanced on his knee, the volume low. Every few minutes the broadcast repeated. Whistleblower operative known as Agent Serpent has released classified data exposing illegal black operations training programs. Government officials deny involvement. Stevens joined him, carrying 2 tin mugs of coffee. "You think she's dead?" Jackson shook his head. "Dead people don't bring down governments." Morrison wandered over, face pale. "If they find out we helped her." "They won't," Jackson cut in. "Colonel's keeping us off the record." But none of them really believed it. Across the base, soldiers whispered. Some called her a traitor. others a savior. The line between the two had never looked thinner. Colonel Harrison stood in the command office staring at a frozen video frame, the last transmission before the tower exploded. Her face half-lit, calm, unbroken. He'd watched it 100 times. It never changed, but something inside him did. Kane entered quietly, hat in hand. "Sir, the press wants a statement." Harrison didn't turn. "Tell them the truth." "Which version, sir?" "The one that hurts less." Kane hesitated. "There isn't one." Harrison finally faced him. "Then tell them she wasn't our enemy, she was our mirror." That afternoon, military investigators arrived, suits, briefcases, voices that smelled of politics. They spoke in polite threats, the kind that sound like procedure but taste like warning. "Colonel Harrison," one of them said, "we need all remaining Viper-related materials surrendered immediately." "You'll get them," he replied, "when you answer for the ones who sent assassins to my base." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Be careful, Colonel. Loyalty's a currency you can't spend twice." Harrison watched them leave, jaw tight. For the first time in 30 years of service, he wondered who his uniform really served. Night fell early, rain again soft, persistent, cleansing nothing. The recruits gathered in the mess hall, candles flickering because the power grid was still unstable. No one spoke for a long time. Then Stevens said, "She saved us twice, once from the enemy, once from ourselves." Jackson nodded slowly. "And she's still saving us. The truth she sent out, it's bigger than any of us." Morrison looked up, guilt etched across his face. "I used to laugh at her, man, called her weak. I can't stop hearing my own voice." Jackson leaned forward, then changed the tone. "Every time you think of her, remember that silence she had, that strength." They fell quiet again, listening to the rain. Outside, the flag snapped against the wind. The base felt smaller now, like a heartbeat waiting for permission to beat again. 2 weeks passed. Congress held emergency hearings. Footage of closed-door testimonies leaked like cracks in an old dam. The Black Viper program was real, funded, concealed, and, according to every trembling witness, necessary for national security. But the public didn't see necessity. They saw ghosts. Protests swelled in city squares. Signs reading "We are not experiments" waved under gray skis. Maya's name appeared on walls, in songs, in whispers. And yet somewhere behind all that chaos, a question lingered like smoke. Where is she? Because no body had been found, no DNA match, no confirmed death. Only a voice, recorded on that final broadcast, speaking truth like a prayer. Truth doesn't need permission, it just needs light. People replayed it over and over, the way believers replay miracles. At Fort Blackstone, Harrison resumed command under the shadow of investigation, but he changed everything. Training schedules rewritten, psychological profiles reevaluated, the base motto, "Strength through obedience," quietly repainted overnight. The new one read, "Strength through understanding." Kane noticed first, "You're rewriting doctrine, sir." "I'm rewriting what broke her," Harrison replied. And he meant it. Late one evening, as fog crept across the range, Jackson found a small package outside the barracks door, unmarked, wrapped in brown paper. Inside lay a flash drive and a folded note. 3 words written in clean, measured handwriting. "Keep teaching them." He ran to Harrison's office, breathless. "Sir, look." The colonel turned the note over, tracing the letters with his thumb. The ink was smudged, but at the bottom, faintly pressed into the paper, was the outline of a coiled serpent. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Harrison said quietly, "Looks like she shed after all." Weeks bled into months. The hearings concluded, officials resigned, some vanished. Fort Blackstone became a training hub for ethical warfare programs, the kind meant to rebuild what secrecy had poisoned. Recruits studied human psychology, diplomacy, restraint. The Serpent Doctrine, they called it. Harrison hated the name but couldn't deny the effect. Discipline rose. Incidents fell. Soldiers started thinking before shooting, listening before judging. And sometimes, during quiet drills at dawn, a voice would echo in Jackson's memory, soft, certain. Silence, patience, movement. It wasn't command anymore. It was conscience. But one night, months later, the conscience returned in flesh. Harrison was leaving his office when he noticed movement by the gate. Just a figure, hooded, standing under the floodlight's dying glow. "Identify yourself," the sentry called. The figure lifted a hand. "Let her through," Harrison ordered, voice trembling. She stepped forward slowly, clothes plain, hair shorter, a thin scar along her jaw that hadn't been there before. "Maya," he breathed. She smiled faintly. "You always did prefer proof over faith." He didn't know what to say. How? "Flares and timing," she said. "The explosion masked an extraction. I planned it that way." He laughed once, half relief, half disbelief. "Of course you did." "You kept them safe," she said. "I tried." Her eyes softened. "You succeeded." They walked along the quiet path beside the empty field. Crickets hummed. The base lights flickered like slow-beating hearts. "You can't stay," he said finally. "I know. They'll hunt you. They already are." He stopped, turning toward her. "Then why come back?" She looked toward the barracks, where muffled laughter drifted from inside. The recruits she'd once called broken. "Because they need to see it wasn't a ghost that saved them," she said. "Just a person." She reached into her pocket, pulling a small metal pin, black enamel, engraved with a serpent coiled around an open hand. "Give this to them," she said. "A reminder that control without compassion is just fear wearing armor." He took it, his throat tight. "Where will you go?" She smiled faintly. "Somewhere that still believes secrets can serve mercy. There aren't many of those places left." He wanted to ask 100 questions, but the words felt small against her silence. She turned to leave, then paused. "Harrison." "Yes." Her gaze met his, steady, tired, beautiful in its calm. "Thank you for saying my name out loud." Then she walked into the dark, her shadow fading with the fog until only the sound of the gate's slow creak remained. The next morning he pinned the black enamel serpent to the wall above the mess hall doorway. No plaque, no explanation, just the symbol. Every recruit who passed beneath it felt something they couldn't name. Fear, respect, hope, all woven together. Jackson stared up at it once and murmured, "She's still watching." Stevens answered, "No, she's still teaching." Morrison just smiled. "Guess the viper didn't bite, it built." And somewhere far beyond Georgia, in a city already forgetting yesterday's outrage, a woman moved through a crowded street unseen. A child dropped a toy soldier in her path. She picked it up, handed it back, and kept walking. No one recognized her. No one ever would. But as she disappeared into the flow of people, her reflection caught briefly in a shop window. Eyes calm, mouth steady, purpose intact. The mark on her wrist glimmered beneath her sleeve. A serpent. Not a threat anymore. A promise. The year turned quietly. Seasons slipped through Fort Blackstone like ghosts: spring rain, summer heat, autumn's whisper. By winter the base looked different, not rebuilt, reborn. The scars of fire had been paved, but the memory remained in every cautious salute, every quiet briefing, every young soldier learning that strength wasn't about the noise you made, but the silence you could hold. Maya Rodriguez had become a myth. Her name was never printed, never recorded. Officially, she didn't exist, but unofficially her lessons lived in every corner of the fort. The recruits she'd trained, Jackson, Stevens, Morrison, now instructors themselves. Different faces, same fire. They taught the new cadets not how to fight but how to see. Observation is survival, Jackson would say, echoing her words. Your weapon isn't your rifle, it's your awareness. And when someone asked who taught him that, he'd just smile. Someone who learned it the hard way. Colonel Harrison retired quietly that spring. No parade, no speeches, just a letter signed with a cold serpent seal slipped under his office door. He never told anyone what it said, but when he left, he paused at the main gate and looked back once, whispering under his breath, "You kept your promise." Then he was gone. The world outside moved on as it always does. Governments shifted, secrets traded hands, new names filled old roles. The Viper Files became a case study in ethics lectures, stripped of faces, reduced to policy. But for those who'd been there, those who'd seen her, it was never theory. It was memory. And somewhere beyond that memory, Maya kept moving. Cities blurred into deserts, deserts into borderlands. She didn't stay long anywhere. A different passport, a different name, but the same eyes, calm, measuring, endless. Sometimes she worked quietly for the agencies that still had a conscience. Other times, she just helped civilians caught between the gears of power. No orders, no payment, no flag. The world called her a rumor. To the few she saved, she was something simpler. A shadow with mercy. One night deep in the mountains of northern Afghanistan, she met a boy, 12 years old, small for his age, holding a stick like a rifle. His village had been hit by drone fire meant for someone else, his family gone, his anger a storm. When he saw her, he didn't flinch. "Are you here to kill me too?" "No," she said softly. He studied her face. "Then why do you have soldier eyes?" Maya knelt, setting her rifle down in the dirt. "Because I learned too late what they can do." The boy frowned. "You don't look like a soldier." She smiled faintly. "Good." He hesitated, then whispered, "Can you teach me?" "To fight. To stop being afraid." Something in her chest broke quietly, that same place that once held orders and obedience. So she stayed for a week, then two, teaching him what she could, how to listen, how to move, how to disappear if he had to. Not violence, awareness. Before she left, she tied a small piece of black fabric around his wrist. "What does it mean?" he asked. She looked at it, a tiny serpent stitched in silver thread. "It means you survived something that tried to break you," she said, "and now you know better than to break others." The boy nodded solemnly, holding the mark like a secret. And when she walked away, she didn't look back, but she heard his voice behind her. "Thank you, Viper." For the first time in years, she smiled without pain. Back at Fort Blackstone, change spread like quiet fire. The training grounds that once echoed with shouted orders now carried softer sounds, breath, rhythm, focus. New recruits learned to lead by empathy, not ego. They were taught to ask why before how. In the mess hall, a small plaque appeared under the black serpent emblem. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Unknown operative. No one claimed to know who had placed it there, but no one ever removed it. Visitors asked what it meant. Veterans just smiled. If you have to ask, you haven't learned it yet. One stormy evening, Jackson found himself alone in the same range where Maya used to train them blindfolded. He could still hear her voice, low, steady, relentless. "Don't rely on what you see, rely on what you sense. Vision lies, instinct doesn't." He closed his eyes, took a breath, and aimed at the distant target. The shot rang true. He smiled, whispering, "Still learning, ma'am." And in that moment, a flicker, no more than a heartbeat, he could almost feel her there beside him, calm as ever. Months later, a letter arrived addressed to Fort Blackstone Command. No return address. Inside, one simple sheet of paper with coordinates written in neat block letters, a desert location outside Doha. Harrison, now retired, received the forwarded note. Against reason, he went. He arrived at sunset, the air red, the world quiet. There among the dunes stood a small camp, one tent, one radio tower, no insignia. He waited, unsure why. Then he heard it faint, filtered through static. A woman's voice over the open radio channel, reading coordinates, then names. Refugees, civilians, people who would be safe by morning because someone out there still believed they deserved to be. Her voice, older, lower, but unmistakable. He sat down on a crate, listening until the broadcast ended. Then the signal clicked off, replaced by a simple pre-recorded message. If you're hearing this, keep going. Every truth needs someone stubborn enough to carry it. He laughed softly, wiping rain from his glasses. You stubborn woman. Then he looked up at the stars, thousands of them, scattered like secrets finally free, and whispered, You won. Years passed. The Viper program became legend, then lesson, then myth. But sometimes, myths have work left to do. In a small military academy outside Virginia, a young woman stood during graduation. Her speech wasn't rehearsed, but every word carried weight. My mother used to say strength isn't what you show when everyone's watching. It's what you decide when no one is. Her uniform gleamed. On her wrist, half hidden by the cuff, a small tattoo, a coiled serpent. In the back row, an old man watched her proudly. Colonel Marcus Harrison, gray-haired, tired, alive. And next to him, a hooded woman blending into the crowd unseen. When the applause rose, she slipped out quietly, the corners of her mouth curved in something halfway between peace and farewell. That night she sat on a rooftop overlooking the city. The lights shimmered like fireflies below, each one a story she'd never know. Her body ached. Time had carved its marks, scars, lines, silences, but her eyes still carried that calm fire. She opened a small notebook, pages filled with coordinates, coded names, fragments of thoughts. At the top of the first page, one line written years ago. To live is not to fight is to protect. She closed the book, set it beside her, and looked at the sky. The wind shifted, soft, warm. The same kind that used to sweep across the training fields at Blackstone. She imagined the voices again, Harrison's quiet pride, Jackson's laughter, the recruits who'd learned the hard truth about strength. And for once, she let herself rest. No radio, no mission, no orders. Just the quiet knowing that the serpent didn't strike anymore. It guarded. Somewhere far away, a young cadet asked his instructor why the academy crest bore a snake wrapped around an open hand. The instructor smiled, because strength without kindness is just venom. The cadet frowned. Who said that? Someone who lived it. In the end, there were no medals, no parades. Just a trail of people who walked straighter because of her. Soldiers who hesitated before pulling triggers. Leaders who listened before giving commands. And a single story that kept being told in whispers, in classrooms, in war zones, about the woman who'd been laughed at in training, until a colonel whispered a name that changed everything. A name that once meant danger, but became a lesson instead. Because sometimes, the strongest soldiers aren't the ones who fight the loudest, but the ones who teach others how not to. And in that silence, she lived forever. The serpent uncoiled. The war ended. The world remembered. And somewhere in the wind, soft, steady, unbroken, her voice remained. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.